design the clasp assembly in such a manner. If there is more active fit, obviously it is going to impart more forces on the abutment teeth. Okay. Then next, moving on to the length of the clasp. Obviously, see, if you have a wire, a clasp of orthodontic wire, as the length decreases, it's difficult to bend, right? Because the flexibility decreases. So as the length of the clasp increases, the flexibility increases. As the length of the clasp decreases, the flexibility decreases. Now, when there is more flexibility, there is less stress on abutment. When there is less flexibility, there is more stress on the abutment. So the length of the clasp in terms of acting force on the abutment is inversely proportional. But the length of the clasp in terms of flexibility is directly proportional. Okay, don't get confused. As the length increases, the stress on the abutment decreases. So they are inversely proportional. So you can increase the length of the clasp by making it curved. So as you make the path curved, you need to cover more amount of the distance to reach that point, right? And that is how you increase the length and increase the flexibility. Suppose in this, if you see, I'll draw two diagrams. One is over here and one is over here. Both same, but when I make the path curved, the flexibility increases. The length of the clasp is directly proportional, as I said. Curved clasp has more better stress control and distribution than a straight configuration clasp. Then the material used in the clasp assembly. Okay, so if you are using a cobalt chromium, yes, we discussed earlier few minutes back, it's going to be less flexible, more stress. Gold alloy or wrought wire clasp, more flexible, less stress. Okay, very simple. Then abutment teeth surface. What is the type of surface of the abutment teeth? Is it a natural teeth? It is a crown. Which material crown is it? Okay, so gold crown or a restoration will provide more resistance than enamel. Enamel will provide less resistance, okay, to disengage the clasp from the undercut. The resistance will be less. But when we talk about gold or crown restoration, the resistance is going to be a bit on a higher scale. Okay, then this was the first part. Okay, factors affecting the amount of force. Second is response of the denture or a prosthesis to those forces. First we studied what are the various types of force, what can increase or decrease the force. Now what is the response of denture to that force? Now there are two types of removable partial denture that you should keep in mind: tooth supported, tooth and tissue supported. When I talk about tooth supported, the majority of the support is from the natural teeth. When I talk about tooth and tissue supported, the force is equally or a bit different, but it involves both the tooth and the tissue support. Okay, so when I talk about the tooth supported removable partial denture, the support is mainly received from single type of tissue. Okay, that is your natural teeth. So natural teeth have some amount of compressibility due to that periodontal ligament and its shock absorbing capacity, that is around 25 to 28 microns. So that compressibility is there. Okay, rarely there will be that there are forces which are acting and they are leverage kind of forces which might damage the abutment teeth. Okay, but usually those cases can withstand forces in a good manner, and that are your class 3 Kennedys. What is class 3 Kennedy? You have natural teeth on both the sides of the edentulous space, right? So in that case, both the sides you have natural teeth to take support, and a very minute amount of support is taken from the edentulous ridge. So in that case, it is a tooth supported RPD which can better withstand the forces. Very minimal amount of the leverage forces will be acted. Other is tooth and tissue supported RPD, right? Now there are two different types of tissues, the teeth and the tissue, the soft tissue. So both have different range of compressibility. Soft tissues compress more than the teeth, that is 28 microns. So when there is difference in the resiliency of the tissues, the compressibility, the movement of the prosthesis which is occurring, in that case there are more leverage forces which are acting on the abutment teeth. Okay, so in that cases the stresses will be directed more on the abutment and there are chances that the RPD might get dislodged. So tooth supported and tooth and tissue supported RPD. Okay, now following principles can aid to control the effect of these various forces. Okay, now you can imply various principle to control the effects of these forces. See, these forces are going to be there, either it be tooth supported or tooth and tissue supported, but you should have a clear idea how to control these forces. Okay, so first is maximum coverage of the soft tissues. You need to cover as much as amount of soft tissues you can. Second, you can use the direct retainer efficiently so that it is not giving any unwanted or higher magnitude of forces on the abutment. Then proper placement of all the components of the RPD. So all these three things should be kept in mind. Now any object, okay, any object which is subjected to stress or subjected to force, okay, if there is an object placed and you kick it, that amount of force will be directed in terms of stress on the other side of the object. So if this is an object, I hit it from this side, all the stresses will come out from the opposite side. Okay, those are the internal stresses. Okay, that is called lever action. Suppose I put a weight on this side, obviously this is going to go up, right? So seesaw kind of thing. So similarly, RPDs also have this lever principles like we have in our oral surgery also. First order lever, second order lever, and third order lever principle. First order lever is when a bar is there is a fulcrum which is in the center. Okay, you have load on the one side, effect on the other side, right? Now when I'm putting weight on this end, this is getting raised, but what if I put a support below this load area? This won't get raised because this is not going down. So that is what you do in your RPD. Suppose your RPD is moving like this front and back, you place a rest from where it is getting down, so it doesn't get lifted from the other side. That is what is the three-dimensional mechanics which you have to think in terms of RPD. Suppose this is a prosthesis, it is moving like this up, okay, while patient is doing functional movements, okay, because there is no support beneath this anterior end. When you give this support, the weight is not going transmitted and it is not going to lift from the opposite side. Okay, that is the principle, but that principle is your second order lever principle. See, you usually cannot see first order lever principle in your RPDs. Okay, what you see is the second order lever principle where fulcrum is at the one end of the RPD. Okay, that is your natural teeth, this is your edentulous space. When there is force acting over here, this is getting lifted, right? So what you do, you add a support over here so that is prevented, and that is usually seen in distal extension RPDs where posterior teeth are missing, anterior are present. So when the patient bites, the RPD tends to get lifted, so you add an extra support, and that support is in the form of indirect retainer. Direct retainer will hold the teeth from both the sides, indirect retainer will be added additionally to prevent this movement, right? So that is your second order principle. Third order principle usually not seen in RPDs, that is where the fulcrum is in the center, effort on both the sides, and load is over here. Okay, so this is something you see in the tweezers and the forceps. Okay, so that is about your lever principle. Lever principle you need to keep in mind, okay, because somewhere they are also related to your removable partial dentures. Now those lever action, how they are going to occur, I was explaining you, right? So that will occur in three planes. First is the horizontal plane, second is the sagittal plane, third is the vertical plane. So when I talk about an RPD, it can move around an horizontal plane, a horizontal plane, a sagittal plane, and a vertical plane. Okay, three planes. Either your RPD can move front and back, either it can move left and right, or it can rotate, twist around. Okay, these are the three kinds of movement only which will occur in a removable partial denture. So when I talk about horizontal fulcrum line, it passes from one side of the abutment to the another side of the abutment. Here all the natural teeth are present. Here it is an edentulous space, right? So the fulcrum line will pass from left to right. Okay, now the fulcrum line will control the rotational movement of the RPD that is occurring away from the tissue, so that front and back movement is prevented. Okay, then we have, these are considered to be the most vulnerable type of forces. Then you have sagittal fulcrum line. This controls the rocking or side to side movement. this side to side movement, left and right tilting of RPD is prevented by this sagittal plane or the sagittal fulcrum line, the plane dividing the body into two halves. Similarly, you divide the edentulous ridge into two halves, and then the tilt which is occurring on both the sides, that is prevented. Vertical is the rotational movement along the y-axis. So vertical fulcrum line controls the rotational movement around the y-axis. So front and back, left and right, and rotational movement, all these three planes only you have to keep in mind when you are designing the RPD. Okay, then inclined planes, there is something which you need to understand. Suppose I have a two object with an inclined plane. When I apply force on one side of the plane, two things can occur. Either they can slide against each other, or they can move away from each other, right? So that is what is an inclined plane. That is what occurs in an RPD also. So now you are thinking of controlling the stresses by various design considerations, right? You need to think about direct retention, you need to think about the forces of adhesion and cohesion, the frictional control, the neuromuscular control, the clasp position, and number of placement of clasp. This all you will study when you study all the different parts of the RPD. What I want to make you understand is the different configurations which are there. First is the quadrilateral configuration, where you have 4 abutments and rest is the edentulous space. Okay, so in that case, good, you can give direct retainer on all the 4 sides. And see, now in this case all your movements will be restricted because there is clasp front and back. The antero-posterior movement is restricted, both the sides clasp are there, the left right movement is restricted, all 4 corners clasps are there, the rotational movement is restricted. This is called Kennedy's class 3 modification 1 or modification 2 if this is also an edentulous area. Now this is very effective. It is called quadrilateral configuration. It is very effective in controlling all the various forces. Second you might get is due to Kennedy's class 2, where only one side edentulous space is there, that becomes a tripodal configuration. Okay, so you have 2 abutments over this side, 1 abutment on this side. Still a better stabilization of forces can be expected, right? Because the rotational forces will act on this abutment, right? So that is stopped. The front and back also will be stopped because antero-posterior clasps are there, and left and right is also stopped to an extent because on the opposite side also you have an abutment, right? So tripodal configuration also a good configuration to go and design. Problem is the bilateral configuration, where you need to think twice, right? Because both the sides you have clasp only 2. So antero-posterior also to an extent only is limited, left right also is to an extent limited, but rotational is well counteracted. Okay, so this situation is your class 1 lever principle, or class 2 also you can say. You have to convert this into class 2 by placing 1 additional or 2 additional indirect retainers. When you place these 2 additional indirect retainers, okay, what happens? This becomes your load, effort and fulcrum. So this becomes your class 2 lever principle. So you need to convert that class 1 into class 2. So you can add additional clasp assembly anterior to the teeth and shift the fulcrum line. Suppose here is the fulcrum line. Now if you are adding one more clasp, you are shifting the fulcrum line like this. Okay, that you will study better when you are studying about indirect retainer. Right now just understand what is bilateral configuration. Okay, clasp design again more described in your direct retainer chapter. Denture base if we talk. Okay, so you have L-beam principle. L-beam principle is based on the linear beam theory. Okay, now what does this linear beam theory state? That the flexibility of the bar is directly proportional to the length, but the flexibility of bar is inversely proportional to the thickness. So as you increase the thickness, the flexibility will decrease, but as you increase the length, the flexibility will increase. Okay, so if I take a bar like this and apply force on both the sides, there will be more amount of force which will be acting in the center of the bar. Now when I divide this bar into 2 parts, the center is the parabolic part and outside is the quartic part. The parabolic part consists of 2/4 of the total length of the bar, and on both the sides 1/4 is the quartic part. Now this, what I was saying is, maximum amount of stress will be on the parabolic part, but as we know that the flexibility is proportional to the length. If you want to make this center point more rigid, what you have to do? You have to add more amount of, increase the quartic part and decrease the parabolic part. Okay, that will make it less flexible, because the flexible part which was in the center you decreased. So as you decrease the length, the flexibility is decreased, and then if you act, the forces are acted, it will be less flexible. Okay, that was one concept based on the linear beam theory. Okay, now if you imagine the same situation in maxilla. Okay, so maxilla is like this. Now the the flat part of the palate over here is your parabolic part, and on the slopes both the sides is your quartic part. Okay, so the extension of major connector, as you extend it over the slopes, it increases the quartic parts and makes it less flexible, so that the major connector can withstand forces. If you keep it more horizontal, the forces will be more, it will be more flexible. But when you extend on the slopes vertically, you are indirectly decreasing the parabolic part and increasing the quartic part, so that the forces are well tolerated. Similarly, we have circular configuration also, right, where it's moreover like quadrilateral but still a different one, where you have a circular opening in the center, right? So the circular configuration is somewhat a continuous kind of structure, right? So while doing this, what you do, you are giving a circular continuous structure with a center relief, so that there is better proprioception to the patient, and by this circular configuration all the stresses will be directed equally in the outward direction and well tolerated. Okay, so the forces will be well tolerated, and it makes the bar more rigid and strong. Okay, so in that case circular configuration is also a good one option. Then we have a strut configuration. Strut configuration is what? Suppose you have two pillars and a bar on the center. When you apply load, stress zone is in the center, as I said. But if you give two supporting arms like this, what you are doing, you are decreasing the parabolic part again and increasing the quartic part, so the stresses are well tolerated. So this was all about your principles of RPD designing. A bit difficult or technical to understand, but once you understand the basic physics behind the principles what I was talking, you might have to go through the class once or twice, because it's not something which you mug up at once, but it's just a general physics, okay, which you need to imply. And if you guys are having any doubts, you can contact me through any social media platforms and we can solve your queries. Thank you so much for your valuable time. See you in the next class.